If you give the dogs peanut butter, they'll stop barking. Praise the King. Welcome to Believer Central World Update. I'm Lisa Dennis Sparks, and you're watching Christians United Broadcasting Network, coming to you live from Tulsa, Oklahoma, USA, still and evermore, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Sorry, guys, it is so hot in here. I have to put my hair up. Okay, I mean, forgive me, but it's like 75 degrees in here and the AC is not working. It's a problem. So it's really, really hot in here. So hopefully you won't mind that I just pull my hair up off my neck and throw it in a, grade school ponytail. I don't really care at this juncture. It's just too hot to wear it down here. And I don't know when they'll get that fixed, but it's not fixed right now. So I've got a window open, I've got a fan going, and it's, like I say, it's above 70 outside and it's hot in here. So sorry, but it is what it is. Welcome to the show. We're going to do a Prophecy Monday. Okay. We are looking at the book of Esther to see what we can uncover about the Jewish feast of Purim. We're going to do the book of Esther, then we're going to look at a lot of different aspects of Purim and learn as much about it as we can between now and March 16th and 17th. It'd be March 16th, Sunday, all day, 17th to sundown. We'll just have to see what happens. Maybe this isn't the year for it, but it sure looks like it could be, doesn't it? It does. And for Putin to delay his deadline to move militarily until exactly Purim, when that's the only day out of the entire year that this prophecy can be fulfilled, it is interesting, isn't it? It's extremely interesting. We're in the book of Esther. We're in chapter 4. We're picking our study up at verse 5. Everybody ready? Hi, everyone. I'm sorry we launched late. I'm glad that you're here. Hi, Sandra, Linda, Vonda, Linda, Eve. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome. Let's get right into our study. Esther, chapter 4 and verse 5. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat room, and I will do my best to answer them for you. Esther chapter 4, verse 5. Then called Esther for Hatak, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. Let's back up just a little bit. So let's go back up to chapter 4, verse 1 and get our context, okay? So we'll know what we're talking about here. Chapter 4, verse 1. When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes, put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and bitter cry. Now, a decree has been given that is going to wipe out the Jews. That's what Purim is all about, a threat to wipe the Jews off the planet. And came even before the king's gate, for none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews. They were told that they were going to be killed on a certain day. And fasting and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. They're just begging for God's mercy because they're about to all be slaughtered. In verse 4, so Esther's maids and her chamberlains came and told it her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she sent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him. But he received it not, he refused it. In verse 5 now, then called Esther for Hatach, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and gave him a commandment to Mordecai to know what it was and why it was. So Hatach went forth to Mordecai unto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also he gave him the copy of the writing of the decree that was given at Shushan to destroy them, the one he tricked the king into doing, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king, to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. And Hatach came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spake unto Hatach, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai. All the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come in unto the king these 30 days. What she's saying is that if she attempts to go to the king without him calling her, that if he doesn't hold out his scepter to her to receive her, she's going to be executed. In verse 12, and they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. He's telling Esther, just because you're the queen, that doesn't mean you're going to live through this, because when he finds out you're a Jew, you're going to die too. In verse 14 of chapter 4, for if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall there enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Now, this is an amazing statement, and one that most people remember from the book of Esther, is that God has raised you up for a time such as this. And Esther needed to hear that. She is facing death if the king refuses her. So she's got to get really creative to save her people. In verse 15, then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer: Go, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me. And neither eat nor drink 3 days, night and day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise. And so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So she's going to be brave for her people. She's going to go and request an audience with the king, and she says, if I perish, I perish. But she has to intervene on behalf of her family and her people. In verse 17, so Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Chapter 5, verse 1, now it came to pass on the 3rd day that Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house, over against the gate of the house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. That's all in God's hands right there. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. Well, she's not going to die today. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What wilt thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given thee to the half of the kingdom. Wow, God has really given her favor with this king. He's willing to please her up to half of his kingdom. In verse 4, and Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther hath said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition, and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king hath said, which is tell him what she wants. In verse 9, then went Haman forth that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Haman wants the Jews, especially Mordecai, to bow to him and like he's the king. In verse 10, nevertheless, Haman refrained himself. And when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. In verse 11 of Esther chapter 5, and Haman told them of the glory of his riches and the multitude of his children and all the things wherein the king had promoted him, and how he had advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said, moreover, Yea, Esther the queen did let no man come in with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself. He's like tooting his horn in a big kind of way because He is dining with the king and queen, and just him. So this was a high honor. And tomorrow I am invited unto her also with the king. So he's saying, I went to and dined with them tonight, and then I'm going to do it again tomorrow. In verse 13, yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. This guy is the definition of anti-Semitism. He hates the people of God. He wants them all to die. All of them. And especially Mordecai. In verse 14, then said Zeresh his wife, and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high. And tomorrow, I got the hiccups, really? That happens to me a lot. I mean, what's the deal? Okay. You, my king, and not me. He has a sense of humor, doesn't he? Okay. In verse 14 of chapter 5. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and he caused the gallows to be made. Any plot that would mean the destruction of the Jews, Haman is all for it. Chapter 6. On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who sought to lay hand on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, what honor and dignity hath been done to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, there is nothing done for him. And the king said, who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house, to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servants said unto him, behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, what shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, to whom would the king delight to do honor more than to himself? So he's thinking the king's talking about him. And Haman answered the king, for the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king useth to wear, and the horse that the king rideth upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. He thinks he's talking about himself, see? And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man withal whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delighteth to honor. Then the king said to Haman, make haste, and take the apparel and the horse as thou hast said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. So what he thought was he's planning his own he thinks he's the one going to be honored, so he's really gone over the top. And the king says, do all this to Mordecai and don't leave any of it out. In verse 11, then took Haman the apparel and the horse and arrayed Mordecai and brought him on horseback through the street of the city and proclaimed before him, thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate. But Haman hasted to his house, mourning, and having his head covered. He's humiliated. And Haman told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, if Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. Okay, are we ready to go into chapter 7? Chapter 7 of the book of Esther, in verse 1. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen. Now remember, this is the second time. And the king said again unto Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, if I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue. She's saying, if all we were was going into slavery and being sold, I wouldn't have come to you. She's begging for her life and the life of her people. So she says, but if we had been sold for bondmen and bondwomen, I had held my tongue. Although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, who is he and where is he that durst presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, the adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. I bet he was. And the king, arising from the banquet of wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen. For he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. In verse 8 of Esther chapter 7. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed where Esther was on, where Esther was. Then said the king, will he force the queen also before me in the house? Bad move on Haman's part. As the word went out of the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, hang him thereon. Okay. So the king has given orders to hang Haman on the gallows he prepared for Mordecai. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. Chapter 8, verse 1. On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman the Jews' enemy unto Esther the queen. He gave Esther Haman's house. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spake yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. Good news. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the things seem right before the king, and I be pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews, which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? In verse 7 of Esther chapter 8. Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid his hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for the Jews as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring may no man reverse. Then were the king's scribes called at that time in the 3rd month, that is the month Sivan, on the 23 day. Thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded unto the Jews, and to the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the rulers of the provinces which are from India unto Ethiopia, 127 provinces, unto every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writing and according to their language. In verse 10 of Esther chapter 8, and he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by posts on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together and to stand for their life. He gave them permission to defend themselves. That may be what we see happen in this war. So it says, and to stand for their life, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So see what has happened here, and this is part of Purim here. Notice, he says, where in verse 11, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together and to stand for their life. He's giving them permission to defend themselves, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people and province that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoil of them for a prey. So he's given them permission. The king has given permission to the Jews throughout all of his kingdom to rise up and defend themselves if the message is not received by those who are trying to kill them. In verse 12, upon one day in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, namely, upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar. Now, I am going to be looking into that specific day in verse 13. The copy of the writing for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the posts that rode upon mules and camels went out, being hastened and pressed on by the king's commandment. And the decree was given at Shushan the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. Verse 16, the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, a feast, and a good day. And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. Now it's saying they became Jews. That means they've adopted their religion. It says that in the scriptures that a Jew is not one who is one on the outside, but on the inside. Okay? So you have other nationalities becoming Jews. Okay? For the fear of the Jews fell upon them. They wanted to be Jewish. Everybody wanted to be a Jew in that day. Chapter 9. Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, and isn't it talking about the same thing over here? Same day. Same day there. Let me look at the Hebrew calendar real quick. Hebrew calendar. All right, 2022 calendar. This is January, February, March. Okay. On March 16th, we have Erev Purim. March 17th, Purim. March 18th, Shushan Purim. So we've got 3 days here that it's saying 16th, 17th, and 18th. 16th is Erev, E-R-E-V, Purim, P-U-R-I-M. 17th is Purim, okay? It starts on the 16th at sundown. But this says Shushan Purim is on Friday the 18th. So that is the day, Shushan Purim was the day that the Jews fought back. Okay. Now, let me look at that would be March 16th, 17th, and 18th. Let me look and see Gregorian equivalent of Adar 13. Adar 13 that was Valentine's Day. Interesting. Okay. Okay, Adar is the 6th month of the civil year and the 12th month of the ecclesiastical year on the Hebrew calendar, roughly corresponding to the month of March in the Gregorian calendar. It is a month of 29 days. So it does correspond to March. And if it was on the 13th, that would have been what they would call the Ides of March. Okay? So that's interesting, isn't it? So it says in chapter 9. Chapter 9, verse 1. Now in the 12th month, that is the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put in execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. And that's where this is going again with this war. Now, those who are planning it, they hope that their intention is that the Jews and the Muslims will destroy each other. But it doesn't happen that way because God intervenes on their behalf. In verse 2 of Esther chapter 9, the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt. And no man could withstand them. See, they have the king's favor. For the fear of them fell upon all people. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. He had the favor of the king. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. That's what we're looking at in this coming war. It could be Israel that fires nukes at Russia. And it says that he will rain a fire upon Magog and upon those that dwell carelessly in the isles. Is that us in the United States? I was looking earlier in my studies about what does it mean dwelling carelessly in the isles. So I looked up the word carelessly. And it says it is an adverb. It means in a casual or reckless way, inattentively. How many people are watching what's going on in the Middle East? Oh, in America, probably not that many. Are we the ones in the aisles? We might get hit. Because I figure if Israel fires on Russia, Russia will fire on us. We'll just have to see what happens. But we do know that the people of God prevail. just like at Purim. Now, I wanted to give you some of these. I want to give you some of these synonyms. It's really interesting. For carelessly, synonyms. Okay. Now, these are synonyms of the word carelessly. Now, it says that God will rain a fire on Magog and upon those that dwell carelessly in the isles. Is that us? I don't know. But look for yourself and see some of these synonyms of the term carelessly and see if that describes us. Haphazardly, nonchalantly, neglectfully, unconcernedly. We're not concerned about what's going to go on over there. Really, people are not even paying attention to what's going on over there. Unmindfully, offhandedly, sloppily, hastily, irresponsibly, incautiously, rashly, without care, negligently, inattentively, thoughtlessly, without concern. Who is that? Could that be us? We're going to find out, aren't we? Very, very shortly. Very shortly. Let's continue. Oh, man. In verse 6 of Esther chapter 9, and in Shushan the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. And Parshandatha and Dalphon and Aspatha and Paratha and Adaliah and Aridatha and Parmashta and Arisai and Aridai and Vajezatha. Blah, blah, blah. The 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hamadatha, the enemy of the Jews, slew they. But on the spoil laid they not their hand. So the Jews slayed Haman and all of his sons. Well, Haman, he hung on the gallows that he made for Mordecai. But when the Jews went to defend themselves, they ended up slaying all 10 sons of Haman. In verse 11, on that day the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. Now, what this looks like, we have those 3 days we were talking about. You have Purim, which is the attack against Israel. But then you have Shushan Purim, which is where the Jews kill their enemies instead of being killed. On that day, the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. This is Esther chapter 9, verse 12. And the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan the palace, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. Or what is thy request further? And it shall be done. Isn't that cool? She's got some serious favor with the king. Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto this day's decree. And let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it so to be done. And the decree was given at Shushan. And they hanged Haman's 10 sons. Now, did you notice that on the calendar I was showing you, there's a Shushan Purim also? Do you notice that? Shushan Purim. That is where the Jews fight back. So from the sundown the 16th to sundown the 17th is where Israel would be attacked. Sundown the 17th to sundown the 18th, that's Shushan Purim. That is where the Jews defend themselves and destroy their enemies. Okay? In verse 15 of Esther chapter 9, for the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan. But on the prey they laid not their hand. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000. 75,000. Okay? This is why I'm telling you, Purim aligns with this Gog-Magog war, because you're going to have tons of deaths. But it says here, but the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes, those that came and tried to kill them, 75,000. 75,000. I wonder if that is a comparable number to those that fall in the valley north of Israel. I have a feeling it could be more than that. But they laid not their hands on the prey. On the 13th day of the month Adar, and on the 14th day of the same, rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Quiet, Henry. There's a kitty cat outside my window. My window's open. He hears my voice, and I always feed him. I don't know whose cat he is, but I feed him anyway. So he knows where I live. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day of the same, rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Purim, okay? But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th thereof. And on the 15th day of the same, they rested. Okay? So that would be the Sabbath. Shushan Purim would be Sabbath. And then on the day of the Sabbath would be the 15th day. And they rested. And made it a day of feasting and gladness. Well, let's see. 16th, 17th, 18th. Then you have the Sabbath is on the evening of the 18th and all day of the 19th. But it doesn't show that it is a feast day on the calendar here. In verse 19, therefore the Jews of the villages that dwelt in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. And Mordecai wrote these things, and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and the 15th day of the same yearly, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions to one to another, and gifts to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written unto them. Because Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of all the Jews, had devised against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, P-U-R, that is, the lot, to consume them. Okay? And to destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he commanded by letters that his wicked device, which he devised against the Jews, should return upon his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. Wherefore they called these days Purim. Wherefore they called these days Purim. This is Esther chapter 9, verse 26, after the name of Pur, P-U-R. Therefore, for all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come unto them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing, and according to their appointed time every year. Okay? This whole thing is about Purim. In verse 28, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation. Why? Because you've got another destruction of the Jews falling on Purim again, just prior to the start of the tribulation period, which could be in less than a month for Purim to happen. The Gog-Magog war has to come before the tribulation period officially starts, and it would officially start with the 4th seal, which comes on Passover. If the war does not come at Purim, our watch is over for the year, because there's no way that the tribulation period could officially start and the 4th seal open at Passover if this war has not already taken place. Israel is burying bodies for 7 months, and they begin to burn weapons for 7 years. Okay? So, in Esther 9:28, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation. This is a day of renown, like it says in Ezekiel. Every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews. They are never to stop doing it, because the end time requires them to observe it. And that is how they would know when to expect Gog-Magog. So, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. God wants them to remember Purim every single year because of what happened back then, and because it's going to happen again. Remember Ecclesiastes 1:9? The thing that hath been is the thing that shall be, and the thing that hath been done is the thing that shall be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. In verse 29, then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail. Okay, we're going to go take a break real quick, and when we come back, we'll start again in verse 29 right after this.
my strongest fear. You are greater than the lies I hear. And no matter what may come today, you're the God who comes to make a way. And where would I be without you? Where would I be without your love? Without your love, you've given me a song to sing to, given me a song to sing to you. All alone. You are present in my time of need. You bring truth to insecurity. And no matter what may come today, you're the God who comes to make a way. Where would I be without you? Where would I be without your love? Without your love, you've given me a song to sing to, given me a song to sing to you. Oh,
Welcome back to your Way Happy Bible Study on CUBN. Hi, guys. How's everybody doing? Well, let's look at what's going on. What do you guys think? Hey, Sandra, you doing all right? So glad to see you, sister. Hi, Linda. Linda says, hello, everyone. Vonda says, glad you're back. Linda says, hi, all. Shalom. Crystal, hi, Crystal, how you doing? I'm so glad to see you, Eve. Always great to see you. Hello, John. Hi, Janine. You're here. Yay. Hi, Penny. Hi, Jan. Linda says, I love this story. Hi, Jasmine. You doing all right? John says, Lisa, I think it means us. Well, John lives in Barbados. Okay. I don't know what it's talking about. It says those that dwell carelessly in the isles. Who is it dwelling carelessly in the isles? Linda thinks it is Great Britain. And she said carelessly could be atheistic. I think it just means that they don't care what happens to Israel or Russia or, I don't know. Eve says March 17th is my birthday. Oh, we'll have to, I really hope that doesn't happen on your birthday, but what a trip, huh? Ugh. She says, I will never forget to observe Purim. Yeah, your birthday is going to remind you every year, isn't it, sister? I'm so glad that you're enjoying the study. Hi, Bernadette. So glad to see you. Linda says, thank you for broadcasting, Lisa and Troy. Well, I'm so sorry I haven't been here. I had one of my monster headaches this weekend. I was down the whole weekend with my head in the toilet. And I went to the doctor today. And, I still am recovering. When I get those, my head actually feels sore to the touch, like I've been hit in the head with something. So I have felt better than I feel today, but I'm going to study either way, so you might as well study with me, right? I don't see any questions. I don't see any questions about anything. I don't know who it is that dwells carelessly in the isles. But it is possible that if Russia comes down against Israel with that kind of force, Israel will fire nukes at them. And they will fire nukes at Iran and Turkey and Russia. And then Russia would fire nukes at us or at Europe. I don't know. Is the Isles, is that the UK? That's one isle. I just don't know. We'll have to see. But the people of God come out on top of this. Now, Israel is going to sustain quite a bit of damage. And we could too. But one of the game changers and why this war is coming upon us is because we have technology now that interferes with the mutually assured destruction narrative that they've been clinging to for years. Russia cannot intercept our missiles, but we can intercept theirs. Now, will they? I don't know if they'll intercept them or not, or if they want us to get hit. I don't know. We're all going to find out soon. But I think it's really, really important to identify Purim for you as the prophetic fulfillment. If it comes, when the Gog-Magog war comes, Purim is the only day it can come and be fulfillment of the prophecies. Exact fulfillment. Okay? And if that happens exactly on Purim, if this war comes on Purim, where on this, it would be sundown the 16th would be where you have at eventide trouble, and before morning he's not. That could be Bashar Assad. It also could be Putin. Okay? But it's Damascus. It's talking about Damascus. Nobody ever sees Bashar Assad, but evidently he's in control. I just don't know. It could be Bashar Assad. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. But if it doesn't come exactly on Purim, then our watch for the whole year is done. The trib cannot start this year if that war doesn't come exactly on Purim. That is the compelling thing about Bible prophecy, is that it happens on very specific days. Just like this war can only come up at Purim and be prophetic fulfillment, exact and precise fulfillment. The fourth seal can only open one day out of the year too. See, the Gog-Magog war can only start one day out of the year, Purim. And this is something new that I've learned from the scriptures, or, we've been looking for it possibly between mid-November and mid-December, because that's where the bird migration was. Well, there's another one in March during Purim, okay? There's 2 a year, and this is the second one, okay? So it is possible. If this war comes exactly on Purim, and fulfillment of the prophecy of this war, then we would be on heightened alert to watch for the fourth seal 1 month later at Passover. The world is going to be so traumatized. Excuse me. The world's going to be so traumatized by this war. And then 1 month later on Passover for the death angel to show up and he's going to call back the numbers of the children of evil for us, to where he's going to cut their numbers significantly, because he's going to take all of their firstborns, from the little babies all the way to the old people, and even their animals. Those who are children of evil, all their firstborns will die, every single one of them. And that is 1 month after the world is totally traumatized by this war. You're looking at, between seals 2, 3, and 4, 25% of the global population dying. And it also covers 25% landmass. Now, it looks like, but it could, if they fire over here, it could be all over the place for all we know. But we're looking at 25% of the population dying. It's around 2 billion people. Do you know how traumatized the world's going to be if this war happens and you've got 2 billion people dying? But those 2 billion would include those that would die at Passover. That would include those numbers as well. We're going to learn as much as we can about this situation before Purim comes. Now, do I think it's going to happen? I don't know. I'm a researcher, not a psychic or a prophet, but it sure does look like it could. Now, I learned my lesson 10 years ago, when I thought it was 10 years ago that I did the rapture warning video, and I thought the war was right on top of us at that time. But we had to go through this next 10 years of wars and rumors of wars. Now I don't know if it's finally here or not. We're just going to have to watch and see. It's possible. But what I can tell you is if it doesn't, if the war doesn't come on Purim, and then we're looking at 2025 for the next possibility. You think this war is going to hold off till 2025? I don't. But who knows? We'll just have to see. I think we need to be prepared for this for this war to take place. And maybe it won't. But aren't we kind of stupid if Putin has set the date, the exact date, the only date that this war can happen on and be prophetic fulfillment is the same day that Putin has given as his deadline. Now, what? The chances are what? 1 in 365 that he would do that on that exact day? I don't know. But I think that we're not very wise if we disregard this possibility, given that it is the Russian leader who has given us the date from his own intentions. And why would he give us the date? I think God wanted him to give us the date so we could figure this out and have some forewarning. Bible prophecy makes a huge impact on people when you tell them Purim and then the war comes exactly on that day. They are impressed by that, as am I. I'm totally impressed by the accuracy and precision of Bible prophecy. We need to expect this war at Purim in whatever year it takes place. I think it's time, but that doesn't mean I'm right. Okay, I've thought it's time for years, and I've thought it's been time for a long time. Okay, 10 years ago I expected this war because the countries were aligned even back then. I mean, how would you ever know? All you can do as a watchman is just tell people, hey, everything's aligned. Okay, but then 10 years later, it's still aligned, but much more so. Much more so. Okay, so we'll just have to wait and see if this war comes exactly on Purim. Then buckle up, because we would be on heightened alert for the fourth seal at Passover. And if that fourth seal opens at Passover, which is the only day of the year the fourth seal can open, just like Purim is the only day the war can start, Passover is the only day that the fourth seal can open. But that fourth seal, when it opens, that officially starts the 7-year tribulation period. 1 Thessalonians 5:2, for ye yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord, that's the tribulation, so cometh as a thief in the night. Jesus is not the thief in the night. A thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Okay? Jesus doesn't come, if he comes and takes his own, he's not a thief, is he? They may end up calling him the thief in the night because guess who the death angel is? It's God himself. He is the death angel. And we can verify that in Exodus when he says, I, the Lord, do these things. Okay? When he's talking about all this. So he is the death angel. And in that form, he may be the thief. But when he comes for us at the rapture, he's not a thief. How's he a thief if he takes his own? He can only be a thief if he takes what doesn't belong to him. But the firstborn tares belong to him. So he's still not a thief. But they will think he is. They will think he is. Because they don't know him. and he comes and takes their firstborns. Well, if you knew the scriptures, the firstborns are always belong to God, whether it's wheat or tares. Firstborns. Okay? And by the flesh, the firstborns inherit, right? And then, but by the Spirit, it's the secondborn that inherits. Okay? Let's get back into the scripture. We're almost finished with the book of Esther, and then we're going to look at some other things about Purim here and see what we can, any more details we can find out. In Esther chapter 9, verse 29, picking up our study, let's recap 28. And that these days, well, let me start at 27 because this is a complete thought here. The Jew, in verse 27, the Jews ordained and took upon them and upon their seed and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing and according to their appointed time every year. And that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation. Why? Because they needed to remember it because it's going to happen again right here before we go into the trib. That these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city. And that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seed. He wants them celebrating and remembering Purim and what happened every single year. Because now is when they need to be remembering it, okay, for this coming war. Haman raises his ugly head again in the form of Vladimir Putin. In verse 29, then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter of Purim. And he sent the letters unto all the Jews, to the 127 provinces of the kingdom of Ahasuerus, with words of peace and truth, to confirm these days of Purim in their times, appointed according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed, the matters of the fastings and their cry. And the decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. Chapter 10. And the king Ahasuerus laid a tribute upon the land and upon the isles of the sea. Upon the isles of the sea. Interesting. And all the acts of his power and of his might, and the declaration of the greatness of Mordecai, whereunto the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people and speaking peace to all his seed. Notice, these things are written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. You're looking at the Persians raising their ugly head again now, just like they did then. This was the kingdom of Persia. Ahasuerus was a king of Persia. All right? The Medes and Persians. That's Iran. The Persians. Okay? Iran they've been raising their ugly head against the Jews again this entire generation. And more specifically, just since 1979, when the Shah of Iran was deposed, who was a friend to the West. And then that is when the Ayatollah Khomeini took over, 42 years ago? 43? Somewhere in there? It's time for that old guy to retire, isn't it? He may not live through this. I figure Tehran will be gone. Moscow will be gone. Istanbul, Ankara, Turkey, be gone. After this war, there is no more radical Muslim threat to Israel anymore. They're all dead. The Arabs haven't really been their enemy in the first place. What happened is that the Roman Catholic Church invented Islam, and they have inflamed and provoked the Arabs to murder the Jews ever since. They've armed the Arabs to come against Israel. What Biden did in Afghanistan, leaving all that equipment, he's out of his mind. Well, I guess he would like us to think so. He probably is. But those behind this are not out of their mind. Biden's not running anything, okay? He's a puppet. Those behind the scenes that are running these things, they want the Jews and the Arabs to destroy each other. That's their plan. But Israel survives. And I think that we do too in the United States, because we have more Jews here than there are in Israel. But it's worth noting that Israel receives a lot of damage from this war. I think their electrical grid is down completely, which is why they're burning weapons for 7 years. It would take time to rebuild their electrical grid. It's totally down. They won't pull firewood out of the forest. They're going to burn weapons. We're going to take a real quick break. And when we come back, we're going to look at some more facts about
Oh, we welcome you, Lord. Come like you want to. Come like you want to. Jesus, have your way. God of breakthrough, nothing can stop you. Let your freedom reign, oh Lord. You're falling out like heaven's rain, enthroned upon your children's praise, and you tear it down our barricades as we sing. We welcome the healer in this place. We welcome the author of our faith. We welcome the God who makes a way. His name is Jesus. His name is Jesus. King of heaven, here in your presence. Oh, how good you are. So very good. You're falling out like heaven's rain,
and let your living waters fall on sons and daughters. We will not resist your heart. Oh, come and bring the breakthrough. We surrender to you. All our hope is in you, God. Your hope, Lord. We pray, let your living waters fall on every son and daughter. We will not resist your heart. Oh, we say yes to you, Jesus. So come and bring the breakthrough. We surrender to you, Lord. Our hope is in you, God. We welcome the healer in this place. We welcome the author of our faith. We welcome the God who makes a way. His name is Jesus. Oh, we welcome you, Lord. We welcome you, healer, in this place. We welcome you, author of our faith. We welcome you, God who makes a way. Your name is Jesus. We welcome you, Jesus. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Welcome back to your Way Happy Bible Study on CUBN. Okay, any questions in the chat room? Vonda says, if we intercept missiles, what will happen to the fallout? It will still be nuclear. Yeah. I mean, I think this war is going to change the world forever as we know it. Whether we get hit or not. Okay. Now, Israel is saved. But if you notice in Esther, God intervened from a distance. And he allowed the Jews to defend themselves. And he was with them and they overcame. I think you're looking at the same kind of situation this time, where you have an eventide trouble. And before morning, he is not. I think Israel is going to fire on Damascus, Istanbul, the capital of Turkey, and Ankara. Also Moscow, Tehran. Okay? I think it's entirely possible that Israel is the one firing these nukes. And their enemies will all be destroyed. Now, see, during the tribulation period, which would start probably about a month later at Passover, if this war happens exactly on Purim, during the tribulation period, the enemy is not Muslims. It's Rome, the new Caesar in Rome, just like when Jesus was here. That's the snake in a dress, the Pope. He's the Antichrist, and I've been proving it since 2014. He's the one. He meets every single Bible criteria. And the false prophet would be Rabbi Baruch Kahane, a Jesuit, member of the Sanhedrin. See, Shimon Peres was a Jesuit. The Jesuits are wicked and evil. And I have put some videos on my wall with the hyphens showing from the Fuel Project, showing the Jesuit oath the Jesuit deception, and I can't remember what the next one was called, but it had something to do with the Jesuits as well. So that gives you some information on them. But it looks like Israel is going to defend themselves. And if Israel feels like they are being invaded in a way that they cannot win, they will fire nukes. They will. And they probably do. And when Russia sees that they're being fired on, they'll probably fire at us. And Israel's going to take a lot of damage. And there will be a lot of deaths. But Israel's the one standing after this is over. And they are burying bodies, their entire population. Their entire able-bodied population is burying bodies for 7 months. That's a lot of bodies. They killed 75,000 back then in Esther's time. That's a lot of people. It'll be way more this time. Israel will defend themselves. And that's how, they will defend themselves. And I think that this is going to turn out to be really, really bad. And that would be when the Pope Antichrist rises on the scene right after this war, because you're going to have a world that is completely traumatized by the death of 2 billion people. And everybody's freaked out. And who is it that gets on the television to comfort everyone? The snake in a dress. Stay Puft. Looks just like him, don't you think? I think it looks just like him. He cracks me up. Okay, let's wrap this up. We're going to pick it up right here at verse 29 in Esther chapter 9. Then Esther the queen, the daughter of Abihail. Did we already finish it? We already did, didn't we? Did we finish chapter 10? I know that we got to chapter 10. There's only 3 scriptures, so I'll give those to you. And the king Ahasuerus laid a tribute upon the land and upon the isles of the sea. The isles. Those who dwell carelessly in the isles. I don't know who that is, but since Israel sustains a lot of damage but still wins this war, we might also sustain a lot of damage, but we would survive like Israel survives, because there's more Jews here than there is there. Okay? And it's possible that we're involved. This is where he keeps his hidden ones, a lot of his hidden ones. Okay? So I think we will come out of this okay. I don't think that the USA will be destroyed until probably the 6th trumpet, but I could be wrong. It could be in a month. I hope not, but I just don't know. He hasn't mentioned the USA prominently at all, I think, because he's hidden so many of his people here. So he doesn't mention us. But I think that our fate is definitely tied to Israel. They're going to receive a lot of damage. At the very minimum, their electrical grid is down. We'll just have to see what happens. But we're going to be watching Purim very, very closely. And all the acts of his power and of his might, and the declaration of the greatness of Mordecai, whereunto the king advanced him, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? I remember reading that. So we did finish. For Mordecai the Jew was next unto King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted of the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people and speaking peace to all his seed. Let's look and see what else we can find out about Purim. Okay, All right. Let me find a Jewish source. Here, let's go to Shabbat.org. You can find this page. Here, let me put this on the top of my wall. And you can follow along. Okay, I've just put an article from Shabbat.org, a really good Jewish source, on my wall that's called What is Purim? Now let's go through this and see what it says here. The jolly Jewish holiday of Purim is celebrated every year on the 14th of the Hebrew month of Adar, late winter, early spring. Purim 2022 begins on Wednesday night, March 16th, and continues through Thursday, March 17th, extending through Friday in Jerusalem. It commemorates the divinely orchestrated salvation of the Jewish people in the ancient Persian Empire from Haman's plot to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, infants and women, in a single day. Now, this war could be over in 2 days. It might only last 2 days. Literally lots in ancient Persian. Purim was thus named since Haman had thrown lots to determine when he would carry out his diabolical scheme. Haman is kind of like Khomeini or Erdogan from Turkey. Purim was thus named since Haman had thrown lots to determine when he would carry out his diabolical scheme, as recorded in the Megillah, which is Book of Esther. Okay, here's the story in a nutshell. The Persian Empire of the 4th century BCE extended over 127 lands, and all the Jews were its subjects. When King Ahasuerus had his wife, Queen Vashti, executed for failing to follow his orders, he arranged a beauty pageant to find a new queen. A Jewish girl, Esther, found favor in his eyes and became the new queen, though she refused to divulge her nationality. Meanwhile, the Jew-hating Haman, and remember, the valley, after this war is over, they call that valley they bury all those bodies in, the Valley of Haman Gog. And then it says it's a day of renown when this happens. That means it's a feast day, Haman Purim. Okay, that's how we come up with Purim. Now it says, meanwhile, the Jew-hating Haman was appointed prime minister of the empire. Mordecai, the leader of the Jews and Esther's cousin, defied the king's orders and refused to bow to Haman. Haman was incensed, and he convinced the king to issue a decree ordering the extermination of all the Jews on the 13th of Adar, a date chosen by a lottery Haman made. Well, Haman chose the date. Who's choosing the date? Putin. Mordecai galvanized all the Jews, convincing them to repent, fast, and pray to God. Meanwhile, Esther asked the king and Haman to join her for a feast. At a subsequent feast, Esther revealed to the king her Jewish identity. Haman was hanged, Mordecai was appointed prime minister in his stead, and a new decree was issued granting the Jews the right to defend themselves against their enemies. It's the Jews that defend themselves. Okay? That's part of Purim. But because of their success, it is credited to God. He's the one that intervenes on their behalf. On the 13th of Adar, the Jews mobilized and killed many of their enemies. On the 14th of Adar, they rested and celebrated. In the capital city of Shushan, they took one more day to finish the job. Why is it called Purim? Purim means lots in ancient Persian. The holiday was thus named since Haman had thrown lots to determine when he would carry out his diabolical scheme. You can pronounce this name many ways. In Eastern tradition, it is called Purim. Purim. Among Westerners, it is often called Purim. Some Central European communities even call it Purim. Warning, calling this holiday Purim, as English speakers are sometimes wont to do, is a surefire newbie cover blower. Okay. Purim observances. Reading of the Megillah, the book of Esther, which recounts the story of the Purim miracle. This is done once on the eve of Purim and then again on the following day. Giving money gifts to at least 2 poor people. Sending gifts of 2 kinds of food to at least 1 person. A festive Purim feast, which often includes wine or other intoxicating beverages. Purim traditions and customs. There's a spirit of liveliness and fun on Purim that is unparalleled on the Jewish calendar. If there were ever a day to let loose and just be Jewish, this is it. It is also customary for children and adults, if they desire, to dress up in costumes. A traditional Purim food is Haman Tashin, or Osnei Haman, 3-cornered pastries bursting with poppy seeds or another sweet filling. On the day before Purim, or on the Thursday before when Purim is on Sunday, it is customary to fast, commemorating Esther's fasting and praying to God that he save his people. When to celebrate. One of the unique aspects of Purim is the diverse timing for its celebration. Common custom. Jews all over the world celebrate Purim on Adar 14, the day when our ancestors rested from the war against their enemies. Walled cities. Since the Jews of Shushan rested 1 day later, their Purim was deferred to the 15th. This was extended to include any city that was surrounded by walls in the days of Joshua, notably Jerusalem. Small towns. In ancient times, villagers only banded together with fellow Jews in the larger towns on Mondays and Thursdays, which were market days. Thus, the sages decreed that they should read the Megillah on the market day preceding 14 Adar. This custom is no longer practiced. Note that on Jewish leap years, there are actually 2 months called Adar. There's Adar and Adar 2. Purim, let's see. Purim is celebrated in the 2nd Adar, but 14 Adar 1 is still a happy day, referred to as Purim Katan, or small Purim. Now, in March would be the 2nd Purim, because they, the first one was at Valentine's Day, okay? This is getting interesting. The meaning of Purim. In addition to the miracle of Jewish survival despite the efforts of our enemies, Purim celebrates God's intimate involvement in every aspect of this world. Even though there were no overt miracles recorded in the Megillah, indeed, his name is not even mentioned once. God was actively pulling the strings to care for his nation. Additionally, Haman's edict catalyzed a spiritual revival among the Jews. In a sense, this was even more significant than the covenant at Sinai, an overwhelming spiritual experience that compelled the Jews to accept the Torah, See, they're going to go right back to the Torah after Purim. After this war, they're going to go right back to the Torah. They're going to rebuild the temple, and we're back in the Old Testament again. Old Testament law, except for the children of God who are still under grace during that time. They will go back to Old Testament law. See, it says right here, an overwhelming spiritual experience that compelled the Jews to accept the Torah. The final 7 years are law. The Jews are under law through the Antichrist, but under grace through Jesus Christ. Since it occurred of their own volition, even as they were scattered among the Persian people and immersed in their culture. It was in the merit of the spiritual reawakening that God orchestrated their salvation. Too often, Jewish communities have narrowly escaped catastrophe. More often than not, the plot involves an evil tyrant who follows the ways of Haman. I would say that would be Erdogan and Khomeini, Turkey and Iran. And just like the Purim story, God is there to save his people from certain doom. Some communities make their own Purim holiday on the anniversary of the date of their respective salvation. Some even read the chain of events from specially made Megillah scrolls. In modern times, the plans of some of our nation's worst enemies have been thwarted on this day. In the early 1950s, Joseph Stalin, the ruthless butcher of millions of innocent people, had bloody plans for dealing with the Jewish problem in the USSR. Just as things were reaching a crisis point in 1953, he died on Purim. What a trip. In 1990, Saddam Hussein of Iraq defiantly invaded nearby Kuwait. As pressure ramped up from the international community, his army began firing Scud missiles into Israel. The Rabbi Menachem M. Schneerson repeatedly assured the people of Israel that they would be protected. After the U.S.-led forces attacked Iraq, they were quickly victorious and the hostilities ended on Purim. The hostilities ended on Purim. What a trip, huh? That's amazing. When Jews meet each other on the joyous holiday of Purim, they greet each other with wishes of happy Purim. In Hebrew, you say Shag Purim Samich. In Yiddish, the traditional blessing is for Al Frolichen Purim. And that's what I can give you a little bit more information here about some of these. Let me now this is called the hoorah that saved 3 million Jewish lives. The Stalin cult, every year as Purim approaches, I think back to the fear and dread that was our lot in the weeks before Purim 1953. Stalin supported the ideology of a Jewish state, but opposed the Jews who requested to immigrate there. A wave of arrests between the years of 1948 and 1953 targeted Jews specifically. Day after day, a vast number of articles appeared in the major newspapers about robberies, corruption, and swindling. The common denominator in all of them was that all of the suspects in these crimes had obvious Jewish names. The miracle of Stalin's death, that's amazing. He says, in the meanwhile, we were clueless as to the events transpiring in Chabad World Headquarters, 770 Eastern Parkway. We did not imagine how the Rebbe experienced and lived with our daily self-sacrifice for Torah and mitzvos, But after we were freed from Russia and heard about it, we came to realize that in the words of the Megillah, Mordecai knew everything that had happened. In hindsight, one can clearly see that in the stormy winter days of 1952 and 1953, the Rebbe was aware of the terrible danger hovering over a large portion of our people. At the Farbringen of Shabbos, Parshas Vayera, 20 Cheshvan 57:13, which is 1952, the Rebbe, that's Rebbe, began to sing a new nagun that had never been sung at Farbringens before. In the midst of the singing portion of the Farbringen, between talks, the Rebbe suddenly asked, "Does someone here know how to sing Anai Ma'amin?" One of the people present began to sing the famous melody that Jews sang with pride as they were marched to their deaths in the Holocaust. Did you know they sang as they were marched to their deaths in the Holocaust? And the rest of the participants joined in. As soon as the nagun began, the Rebbe's expression changed to become very serious. He motioned with his hand that they should sing it forcefully, and he too joined in. In all probability, no one present at the Farbringen understood the meaning of the sudden instruction to sing Ani Ma'amin. No one had any way of knowing what was transpiring behind the scenes in Russia. Okay? I was told at the Farbringens that took place during that time, the Rebbe spoke a lot about the darkness and obscurity of exile that intensified over the years and about the special quality that the Jewish people possess of overcoming the darkness. Despite the fact that the Jews are under the control of the nations of the world, they have the ability to weaken the Kalipa by not being affected by the concealment of godliness and standing steadfast in their faith. Nobody understood why all of a sudden in the middle of a winter day, January 8th, 1953, a few days before the doctor's plot erupted, the Rebbe published a Hasidic discourse of his predecessor from the year 1925, titled, "God Does Not Demand the Impossible from His Creations," even though that date was not noted as a special one in the calendar. This mamar is about the self-sacrifice of the Jewish people. Ma'amar is about the self-sacrifice of the Jewish people in a time when it is challenging to keep Torah and mitzvot. See, Israel's mostly secular. They don't, they're godless, most of them. And if this is our lot in exile, then surely we have the ability to prevail. I've left this information on my wall if you want to take a look at it. I love you guys. God bless you. Thanks for studying with me tonight. Hope to see you on Wednesday where we'll work on our firm foundation in John. Or if I have more Purim information for you, I can give it to you. And in the meantime, do right and risk the consequences.
Jesus, the only one who could ever save, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for